this space. So we're trying it out. And so far, you all look wonderful, and I hope the sound sounds good. Helen and John Meyer, among others. So, okay, so a little bit about today. We are going to announce the 2017-18 season. I hope you all received a press kit on your way in. We are streaming live, so if this all sounds good to you, and if you want to do that playback and just can't get enough of this, after 2 o'clock, you'll be able to see it on the website once again. I ask you to please hold questions until about 1:30, at which time we'll offer questions to all of you, of our guest speakers. But it is now my pleasure to introduce the 7th General Director of San Francisco Opera, Matthew Shilvock.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you all for being here today. The role that the press plays in the arts in San Francisco is a really dynamic one, and you help give us presence, you help give us energy, and you help connect us to the broader community. And so thank you, first of all, for being such great advocates for all of the arts in this great part of the world, and for coming to celebrate our 2017-18 season today. I want to thank board members who are here today from the opera and special guests from the community and the civic world of San Francisco. It's wonderful to have you. Nicola Luisotti, our esteemed music director, could not be here because he is quite literally at this very minute conducting Pagliacci in Torino, but he sends his very best wishes to you all. And of course, as we will discuss, this is his final season as music director, and one where we will be celebrating him throughout the year. I want to thank John Fink and the communications department and the San Francisco Opera crew for putting on this press conference today, and welcome all those who are watching via the stream. It's great to have you as well, and thrilling to be here in the Diane B. Wilsey Center for Opera. As John said, this is our first press conference here, and it's very exciting that we are now a year old in this space. We were just preparing to unveil it this time last year, and it has been a glorious transformation for the company and really allowed us to do some very exciting things that we would not have otherwise done, both artistically but also organizationally, in terms of coming together as a company. To help us really delve into the real weight of this season and some of the great offerings that we have, I'm thrilled that we have 3 very special guests today who will be joining me later up on stage to talk about Girls of the Golden West and the Ring Cycle. We have composer John Adams, director Francesca Zambello, who is also the artistic director of the Washington National Opera and the general director of Glimmerglass Opera, and Peter Sellars, the director of Girls of the Golden West and also the librettist. 3 amazing people from our industry who, just to have them on this stage together with us in this room today is a great treat. I'm looking forward to us having a conversation with them very shortly. We read this morning some very sad news that I just wanted to share with you. We're hearing reports that the German bass baritone Gerd Grachowski passed away over the weekend. As we think about our Ring Cycle, Gerd was our Gunther in 2011, and as well as our Telmarund in Lohengrin and our Jaroslav Prus in Macropolis. He was only 60 years old, and a great, great loss for the industry, a real noble singer, a noble human being. So a real sadness, unfortunately, to begin the day. As I mentioned, it is very symbolic that we're here in the Wilsey Center. It's a real kind of innovation space for the company, and as we look to the future season, it is wonderful that we have this space. We do open our 2nd series of San Francisco Opera Lab in just about a month or so with the dramatic oratorio The Source by Ted Hearn, which is, as you may know, based on Chelsea Manning and the WikiLeaks situation, which of course has particular political kind of implications at the moment. So it'll be a very interesting piece to bring to life at this time. In March, we have Poulenc La Voix Humaine with Anna Caterina Antonacci, who is here for 2 Women, and also the Trojans, which will be a deeply moving experience, I know. Then the vocal ensemble Roomful of Teeth for 1 performance only in collaboration with SF Performances, a Chamberworks concert with the San Francisco Opera Orchestra, and then our Schwarbacher series in collaboration with the Merrill organization, 4 recitals featuring some of the most exciting new singers in our business. And I want to recognize Jean Kellogg, the executive director of Merrill, who is here today, because Merrill is about to celebrate their 60th anniversary this year. and they have been just great partners with San Francisco Opera in championing the training of young artists. And Meryl will have a press release about their exciting activities coming up soon. But Jean, we're thrilled to have you here and thrilled to have the relationship we do with Meryl, so thank you. I also want to recognize John and Helen Meyer, who are here from Meyer Sound today, because Meyer Sound has really allowed our Toby Atrium Theater next door to come to life in really interesting ways. As you know, we feature their Constellation system over there, and it is just an endless possibility of interplay between sound and how sound moves around a space. When we did the orchestra and chorus concerts there recently, we were just thrilled by the warmth of that room for a large ensemble. We've done a number of small things there, but to have 48 choristers in there and to have that space be so spacious, so enveloping, was a real mark of how great that system is. So John and Helen, thank you for all you do for San Francisco Opera. Of course, we return to the main stage in a few months. We have a little hiatus now, but we return with a trio of summer operas, which will be great pieces for the whole community. 3 of the great classics, Rigoletto, La Bohème, and Don Giovanni. The Don Giovanni in a slightly reconceived staging from our previous Giovanni with a new director, Jacopo Spiré. And I'm really excited by what he's going to bring to this piece, the interplay of mirrors, the notion of Giovanni's soul or lack thereof. I think we're in for something very special with that Giovanni, and of course the debut of conductor Mark Minkowski. We are branding the Summer of Love in recognition of what's happening around the city, and of course if opera does anything well, it's get into the situation of love well. And these 3 operas are love in very different guises, of course. Maybe not always real love, but certainly the notion of love and lust will be a topic that will interweave through those summer operas. And then finally, just to bring you up to date on what's happening, 2 months from now, from this very day, on March 17th, Dream of the Red Chamber will play at the Hong Kong Arts Festival as part of our continuing exploration of this piece. Hong Kong Arts Festival, a great partner in Dream of the Red Chamber. 2 performances there, completely sold out. We have a delegation going from here, and I'm very excited to see this work make an imprint in Asia. And we're also beginning to look at taking Dream of the Red Chamber into China as well. No specific news on that just yet, but discussions are continuing and looking very promising. So this piece that had such a spectacular impact here will continue its life in Asia, where it has really been very well received and respected that this company would take on that subject. So I'm now very proud to announce the 2017-18 season. It's a season that we have announced part of already in Girls of the Golden West and The Ring, but we will announce the first part of the season now. And it's a great season of diversity and interest. We have 2 exciting new productions that we'll talk about, a great world premiere, some of the finest singers in the world, both those known to us and some new to us as well. The searing impact of our music director, Nicola Luisotti, in the repertoire that he does so very well, and then showing the full capabilities of the company in the most monumental work of art ever created, the Ring Cycle. It's a season that will really galvanize us together as a company and us together as a community. And I want to give particular recognition to David Gockley, who planned this season in its entirety. And it's a real celebration, I think, of the great tenets of excellence that David has brought not only to this company, but to this industry over his many years. And it celebrates great productions, great singing, great diversity, great balance, all of the things that have made David such a great impresario. So I think in this season, we really celebrate his impact on the world of opera. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of the works that I find particularly interesting, because for me, the great joy of opera is its ability to illuminate who we are, both who we are as individuals and who we are as a society. And I think particularly through the pieces we'll talk about in depth later, Girls of the Golden West and The Ring, we see that real impact of opera to influence the way we think about society. And then through one of our other operas, in a very focused way, we will see how opera can illuminate the life of the individual. But we begin first with one of the great classics of our industry, Turandot. What better way to begin a season, particularly Nicola's final season, than a work that he masterminds so well and that really brings to life this great mythical world and shows us how opera can transcend all of us and find these great archetypal stories in which we can understand ourselves. It's our Hockney production, which has been such a beloved classic here. And what's the really fascinating thing I think about this is just the depth of casting that we are sharing with you. We have 6 performances at the beginning of the season and 6 performances at the end of the season. And through that, those bookends, we will have some great musical masterpieces. Nicola will conduct the opening performances, and as I mentioned, this being his final season, we will be celebrating him throughout, and the Opera Ball is honoring Nicola as their honoree this year. It will be focused on him and celebrating him, and I want to thank Jane Mudge, who is the new president of the Opera Guild, for being here, and Susan Malott, their executive director. Again, great partners in this wonderful community of opera. So the 2 casts, well, when your first cast is Martina Serafin, the Viennese soprano who was last here for the Marschallin in 2007, and your second cast is Nina Stemmer, who was, of course, last here for The Ring. You know you're off to a good start. Just searing musical intensity from those 2 ladies, great proponents of these roles, and wonderful to have Martina back after such an absence. Brian Jade continues to make another role debut with us, and we really like to be known as a house that is a very secure place for a singer to make a role debut. It's a house where they feel supported both by the music staff, the production staff, by the whole company. And just as Brian did in Aida, he will be making his first Calaf with us in both the beginning and the end series. Maria Agresta, the Italian soprano, makes a wonderful debut with us as Liu. I was very fortunate to see her do Violetta in Royal Opera just last year, conducted by Nicola, and such pathos to that role. She is going to be an exceptional Liu for us. We have a few Lius. Tony Marie Parmetry will also do a few of the Lius in the September run. Of course, she stepped in so magnificently as Butterfly for us in November. And then Leah Crocetta will take the second round of Lius, which she has done for us before, and we know how heartbreakingly beautiful that is. Our first run, Timur, is Ray Aceto, who we saw last as Ramphis. And then the second run is the debut of Solomon Howard, which we are very excited about. The second run will be conducted by Christopher Franklin, an American conductor who has worked mainly in Europe, and we're excited to bring him and showcase him here in San Francisco. And I do want to acknowledge Ian Robertson, our chorus director. This, of course, is an opera with some phenomenal chorus work. And as he does always, Ian will bring a masterful sweep to that music. We then move on in our opening weekend, to the Saturday night, which will be our first new production of the season, Electra. And it's hard to believe it's been 20 years since we did Electra, although I know how quickly a decade can go at this company, so maybe it's not too surprising. But it's a really exciting return to us for this Strauss masterpiece. And I mentioned at the beginning this notion about opera unlocking the door to our individual sense of self. And I'm really excited for this production because it does that writ large. This is the debut of Keith Warner, the acclaimed British director, whose Salome and whose Ring Cycle have been seen at the Royal Opera recently. And this is a co-production with Prague and with Karlsruhe. And it premiered in Prague just last year, so we know what will unfold this time in September. What Keith is doing is taking this notion of Electra and transporting it to the present day, but in a way that doesn't forget its antiquity. So we are set in a museum that is closing up at night. It's a museum that is hosting an exhibit of the Electra complex, and a woman gets trapped in the museum. I don't know if she's in the bathroom or something, but she misses the last call and gets trapped in the museum. The gates come down, and she's stuck there all night. So she starts delving into what's there, the Electra exhibit. And as she goes deeper and deeper, she literally finds herself going into the story. And through this exhibit, she finds great truths about herself. She uncovers memories that were deeply repressed. She unlocks the door into her own family and her own life. And again, I think this is what opera does so well for us, and that Keith has taken this and applied it to a whole production concept is really fascinating. He's also not getting away from the fact that this is a fascinating, horror movie writ in opera. And so that's very important for him, this just notion of a very gruesome but entertaining spectacle as well. We have a powerhouse trio of women bringing this to life. Christine Goerke is our Electra. She was last here in Fledermaus in 2007. Stephanie Blythe makes a role debut as Clytemnestra, which I think will be absolutely chilling. You remember her, Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd. Applying that to a really deep, dark role, I think, will be just horrifying in its glory. Adrienne Pjonka, the Canadian soprano who was last here for Tosca in 2009, is our Chrysothemis, and I just saw her in Barcelona do this, and it was so deeply moving. I think she will make a triumphant return here in that. We have the debut of the American-based baritone Alfred Walker as Orest, and also the debut in the pit of the Hungarian conductor Henrik Nanasi. And Nanasi is also the music director of the Komische Oper in Berlin, one of the really exciting companies at the moment, and he is making a triumphant rise in Europe, and we're thrilled to have him here in San Francisco. We then move to Traviata, which is, of course, one of the most enduring stories told on the opera stage, and in our beloved John Copley production, which goes through this story so elegantly and so beautifully. And John, as you may remember, was awarded the San Francisco Opera Medal in 2010 and has been one of the great artistic icons in this company for many years. This, I think, is a really interesting Traviata for us because it's a trio of leads brand new to this company. We have the Romanian soprano Aurelia Florian, who is making her US debut, not just a San Francisco opera debut, an exquisite sound and really beautiful stagecraft that I know she'll bring to this. Attila Ayan is a Brazilian tenor who is doing great things in Europe, but also now more in America. He does Alfredo at the Met this spring with Nicola, so they will have a chance to work on this already together. And then the Polish baritone Artur Roczynski is our Gemont, and again, someone who is really on the rise in Europe at the moment, and we're thrilled to have here. And I do want to give a shout out to Greg Henkel, who is our Managing Director Artistic, who really, and this is a great example of the work he does in Europe, identifying great talent, putting together casts of people that we may not have seen before, and taking a risk on people that he knows will come together in glorious harmony. So Greg, thank you for putting together such exceptional artistry on our stage. This will be the final production conducted by Nicola as music director. And what better way to end than with Verdi, which Nicola owns so powerfully. He breathes new life into these works every time he gets onto that podium. And we are just thrilled to have him express these really important pieces in such a powerful way. And we are already in talks with Nicola about works to come back for after his music directorship has finished. The production will be directed by Shauna Lucy, who is a member of our own directing staff, and I'm thrilled that she will be making her directorial debut with this. And I also wanted to mention our choreographer, Carola Zatush, who is the director of the Bay Area's Theater Flamenco. And this is a really nice connection because the Theater Flamenco was the group that provided the original choreography and dances, I believe, for Traviata when it first appeared on our stage back in 1987. So we're very happy to have them back in this capacity. Finally, before we invite our illustrious guests to the stage, I wanted to talk about our second new production, Massenet's Manon. And this is a co-production with Lithuania and Israel Opera, and a reunion of the team that brought us Capoletti back in 2012, Vincent Boussard and Vincent Lemaire. Vincent Boussard also doing the costumes this time, Vincent Lemaire providing the sets. And this is a production that opened in Lithuania last year, and it is a beautiful expression of the piece. The way that the lighting and the reflective surfaces, not mirrors, but just reflective textures, illuminate this rather ephemeral world in which Manon is moving so quickly between different states of being, from the passionate love to the religious to the desire for wealth and glory, and finally, of course, in poverty. And the way that lighting is used in this is so exceptionally done, and I'm thrilled that Gary Marta, our resident lighting designer, will be bringing this to life for us. Manon, of course, needs an extraordinary cast, and for those of you who were there at the Gockley Gala and saw that rather long kiss at the end, you may have wondered, will we ever see this come to full fruition? And the answer is yes. because we are reuniting Nadine Sierra and Michael Fabiano in this really exquisite opera in which these two young loves could hardly be expressed by any more passionate people, I think. David Purcell is our Lescaut. He was last with us in Andrea Chenier. And on the podium, we have Patrick Fournillier, who you may remember from Cyrano and also from Hoffman in 2013. Patrick is one of the great exponents of Massenet. He has his own Massenet festival, and so will be a great guide for us in this. We have a very nice history with Manon, of course, with some great singers, and we are thrilled to have one of those with us here today, our very own Sherry Greenwald, who was our Manon in 1986. And of course, with Nadine being from the Opera Center, it's a wonderful passing of the baton from Sherry to Nadine. And Sherry, thank you for your beautiful artistry and being such an important part of this company. I did want to mention that on KDFC at the moment, we have Sherry's Cendrillon from 1982 and an archival recording, and it's up there for about another week. So if you'd like to hear some of Sherry in that exquisite role, head to KDFC and you can listen to that for the next week or so. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our special guests to join us on stage. Once again, composer John Adams, director and librettist Peter Sellars, and director and impresario Francesca Zambello. Please come and join me up here. Well, we wanted to continue the exploration of the season and wrap up the fall season by talking about Girls of the Golden West. As you know, we have announced this already. This is our celebration of John Adams' 70th birthday, as it will be the culminating kind of event, really, of what is going to be an incredible sweep and exploration of his works over the coming year. And John and Peter have had such a profound relationship with this company, of course, with the death of Klinghoffer in '92, with Dr. Atomic in 2005, and now with this piece, which I think is set to become one of the great premieres in our industry. John, of course, is resident in the Bay Area, and I think it's just very fascinating that he has been writing this piece surrounded by the very environment that he is writing about, which is quite a unique situation for any composer, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is an exploration of the very rich and diverse and colorful worlds of the mining camps that were unfolding just about 200 miles northeast of here, up in the Sierras around the 1840s and into the early 1850s. And Peter and John have gone deep into the source material to create the narrative and the libretto for this, featuring predominantly the writings of Dame Shirley, who was a wife of a doctor who came out here from the East Coast and spent about 2 years in the mines, I think, and sent these exquisite letters home to her sister on the East Coast, outlining life in the camps in some of the most beautiful prose that exists. In addition to that, they have found great mining songs. We have Mark Twain, we have Frederick Douglass. The span of source material in this is deeply impressive, and it helps really make this our own story. This is a story of us here in Northern California. It's a story that will transcend that beautifully as well. And of course, we have three great partners in the Dallas Opera, Amsterdam, the Dutch National Opera, and in Venice with La Fenice. But I think that it begins here in Northern California is very special, because this is a story not only about our history, but about us, who we are now in the present. And we think about a group of people gathering from all over the world and descending on this part of the world in pursuit of wealth and of glory and of success. Some succeed, many fail. You have the tensions of people coming from different places trying to figure out how to live together. It's not too far removed from where we find ourselves here in 2017 in San Francisco. So I think it's a piece not only about our deep past, but about our current future. And for that, it is particularly exciting. We have a sensational cast for this, a young cast that has worked very extensively with John and Peter in many other projects for the most part. We have debuts from Julia Bullock, who will be Dame Shirley, and I think will bring a spectacular artistry to this. Devon Tynes, who is Ned Peters, the freed slave, who forms a great friendship with Dame Shirley. Ryan McKinney's our Clarence King. I just saw him as Amfortas in Amsterdam, and such a deep weight of sound. He's going to be spectacular in this. And the San Francisco principal ballerina, Lorena Feju, is the infamous Lola Montez, whose spider dance will enrapture and ensnare us all. We have returns from Janae Bridges as Josefa. She was our Bercy and Andrea Chenier. Paul Appleby is Joe Cannon. He was our Tamino last. And the Korean coloratura Hae-jung Lee, who was both our Madame Mao and our Olympia in Hoffman recently. So, and Elliot Medore, who you may remember as Anthony from Sweeney Todd. So a really exceptional cast. And then the debut of conductor Grant Gershon, who heads the LA Master Chorale, and again, a tremendous proponent of John's music and someone who really understands John's textures and pacing and so forth. So this will be a very special experience musically and visually. And we just had the design presentation in December with our incredible designers, David Grokman doing the sets, Rita Ryak costumes, Jim Ingalls lighting, and then John Higginbottom, who will be providing the choreography. And you can see the model at the back there. If you've not had time, I would encourage you to take a look at that and some of the source material for the designs as well, because it really is a fascinating expression of our life here in Northern California. So enough of me. I wanted to turn it over to our guests and ask a couple of questions to help us understand how important this piece is going to be. And John, if I can begin with you. You tailor each of your operas so perfectly to the subject matter at hand. It's never cookie cutter. It's never, the John Adams style. You bring such great nuance and sensibility to this. For something that is so close to home for you, how did you find the musical style of Girls of the Golden West?
Well, I wish I had a method. It would be so nice if I knew what I was doing at the beginning of each piece, but, okay. I wish I had a method. Some composers or artists, they have a style that they can fall back upon, but as you say, Matthew, each work, each opera, music drama needs to have its specific musical DNA. And where I found it for this actually was by reading the texts of these Gold Rush songs. Both Pete and I independently from one another found them in our research. The ones I found online come from the California State Library in Sacramento. And the tunes for them are not particularly interesting. In fact, most of these Gold Rush songs were set to very familiar tunes like Pop Goes the Weasel or Oh Susanna. So I consciously ignored the music, but got into the sort of homespun rhythms of these Gold Rush songs, and so many of them are really hard luck stories. My mule died. My girlfriend sent me a Dear John letter. I lost at poker. I fell into the shaft that I just dug and broke my leg. So, they tell the story in this kind of wonderful, bittersweet way. And so in composing or setting these things, I actually had to honor both that kind of simple quality, which is a hard thing to do in this era of modernism when you're expected to write something fantastically complex. But I had to go in the other direction. And, in a sense, quite a bit of this opera, they're not arias, they're songs. And I think that actually sets the tone for it, particularly in the choruses. We have these minors, most of whom are, they're either drunk or they're out to lynch somebody, or both. And that musical quality that I found within the rhythm of these texts is probably what generated the sound.
And Peter, as I mentioned, so many people in the cast have worked extensively with you, with John. It's a cast of many friendly faces for you both. What will you be looking what will you be looking for from the cast as you prepare them in November?
Well, what's so exciting is opera, of course, is an old art form, but there are a lot of young people doing it. And that is a thrill to see a new generation of just gigantic stars. And here they are. They're going to be the next Leontine Prizes and so on and so on. But we're meeting them now at exactly the right moment. And you get this thrill and energy from, frankly, the absence of star behavior. You know, the idea that actually they're in it because it's cool and they're cool. And you know, stars used to mean dealing with very uncool people. And now this idea that they're truly best friends, all of them, they all have this kind of thrilling sense of a community as they undertake a project. And for them, opera isn't about putting on airs. It's actually is about singing songs. It's this idea of communicating in the most immediate way with people you care about. And that, the other thing that I am thrilled to say is the diversity of the cast. And again, opera is an art form that is by definition international, but of course you want to deepen that and you want to just say how many, many, many levels of American life and the American population can we not only speak to, but can speak from the stage. And can we actually demonstrate the richness of our population of America? And of course, the story of the gold rush is one of those literally shattering things in the entire history of the world. There was never a multicultural moment like the founding of San Francisco from the gold rush on. As soon as gold was discovered, word went out in newspapers all over the world, and people came to San Francisco from China, from Cairo, from Brazil, from Australia, from Scotland, from Germany, from Japan, from everywhere.
And these would have been young people as well.
Yes, and in fact, most people in the gold rush were just in their 20s. And so you have this incredible society of young people and black cowboys moving west, you know, all of this gathering here in California and creating a society that never existed before. And that is incredibly thrilling. And I would like to think that that's also at the heart of an opera that's never existed before.
Absolutely. John, beyond the cast, can you talk a little bit about the musical forces involved? What orchestration have you chosen for this? And what role will sound designer Mark Gray play in this?
Yeah, you know, the orchestration, there's nothing particularly special about it. You know, I looked at the musical material from that time, and it really wasn't very interesting, actually. You know, the country was so new and our culture so raw that you know, we just hadn't found a really interesting musical language, or folk language, or anything of that sort. You know, I put an accordion in there, even though I know they didn't have accordions in 1850. But it just seemed, you know, it seemed like something to give a certain kind of California ethnic quality to it. On the other hand, I discovered I really don't understand the accordion, so I know that when this person who plays this instrument first sees the part, I'm going to get a phone call in the morning. You know, you were talking about the young singers, and one of the great pleasures is working with these, you know, they're in their, most of them in the late 20s and early 30s, and just the other day I got an email from Davon Hines, who is just this really astonishingly gifted baritone, who in December sang my oratorio El Nino with me with the London Symphony, and then did it again with the LA Phil a week or so ago, and I had sent him what I've written for his role of Ned in this. And he sent me back a PDF of a staff with this, numbered the 3 ranges. He said, my voice is broken into 3 territories or 3 ranges. If you write a note up here, you need to go back down here. I need 75% of the notes have to be in this middle range. And, I wish somebody had told me that 30 years ago.
The joy of working with a live composer. Peter, I notice we're looking on the screen at the moment at this striking image, which is our Act 2 set for Girls of the Golden West. And it is a tree up in the Sierras that, you can tell us, Peter, what happened to it. And I was just thinking, last week in the big storms here, the big drive-through redwood was felled by Mother Nature, very sadly. And it reminded me of this iconic moment here. Can you tell us a little bit about why you picked this visual and a little bit about what happens on it?
This is right over to John Adams. John Adams sent early on this image to me in Los Angeles, and it is really stunning. It was from the miners arriving through the Sierras and coming across these huge trees. This one in particular, though, was 26 feet in diameter, and nobody had ever seen anything like it. And people were making 3- and 4-day pilgrimages just to see this tree. And then somebody had the brilliant idea, let's just cut it down. What? And they did. And it took about a month. And it was a giant project. And because redwood actually doesn't decay, it looks like that now. And it's in Big Tree State Park in Calaveras. It is still there, and the body of it is lying prone across the forest. And this tree became such a, the first thing people did was they got on top of it and danced. And so there are all of these incredible engravings that were published all over Europe and in Asia of people dancing on the stump. And it was one of the first images in John Muir's environmental campaign to protect the redwoods. He said not only were these people stupid enough to cut it down, they then, can you believe it, danced on it. So as a kind of image of pointless stupidity, and as an image of what endures, and what in fact actually just disappears with the effluvium of time, it's very powerful and has this kind of moral intensity of, yes, when a tree speaks, even long after it's dead.
Now, you are both from the East Coast, but have now very strong ties to California over many years. And as I said, you were writing this piece in the very environment at which it has happened. Has it changed your conception of California at all, either of you? Has it changed the way you think about this state and its history?
Well, I've lived here so long, I've forgotten that I'm from the East Coast, but, despite my name. I've had a very strong connection to the geography here. I've owned a little shack, I guess, not to put too fine a word on it, in the Sierras that is only a few miles away from where the events in this opera took place. So, the opportunity to compose a work that is so close to, where I've had so many wonderful experiences is very special. But I also think that I was reminded of the fact that the California historian, Kevin Starr, just died over the weekend. And I don't know how many people in this room are familiar with his books, but He wrote about 6 or 7 volumes, History of California, and I read every one of them. I just was so fascinated by the richness and the variety, and as Peter said, we are this thoroughly multicultural state, and being able to write this opera at this time has been both a great privilege, and I have to say, in the course of writing it over the past year and a half, this presidential campaign went on. And there are many things that we discovered about the gold rush that came to play, came up during the presidential campaign. When the white miners, when the gold ran out, they couldn't find it, they started blaming the Mexicans. And they blamed the Chinese, and they blamed the Native Americans, and they blamed everyone that wasn't them, and that sounded awfully familiar. So there are real parallels, and even in my mind, the analogy between California in 1850 and Silicon Valley now. When I read that such and such, an app is valued in the billions of dollars, I just think about, the way the whole gold rush was portrayed to the people back east. It was just unreal information. It was the original fake news that people were being told, all you have to do is get out here, and you can just reach down and pick it up and become fabulously wealthy. So I think, there are so many resonances between what we're experiencing right now and what you'll see in this opera.
Peter, how about you? Did anything surprise you as you dug into the source material?
Well, no, it was just time for the great California opera to be written, and I knew the guy who could write it. So it is, this is history that, of course, belongs to the world, but it's also history very specific to here. And I am thrilled to live in California. I am simply thrilled of the social project of California. I'm thrilled of the cultural project here. I'm thrilled of the environmental project here. It's a very, very powerful and thrilling place to live. And I think this opera represents all of those dimensions. And again, I think one of the things we forget is we frequently frame opera as something from the past. But of course, what opera was doing, Mozart or Mussorgsky or Tchaikovsky, was framing a future. Opera is about framing a future. Opera is about projecting forward, not just looking back. Opera is saying, okay, what can we step forward with? Where are we going? What are we looking towards? And for me, this will be a very powerful evening for that.
And then, John, as I mentioned, you are approaching your 70th birthday celebrations. This will be a very significant year of work across the world. And so much of the operatic journey has been here in San Francisco with San Francisco Opera. As you prepare to premiere this opera here, I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the relationship with the company over those decades and what it's meant to you.
Well, I was just trying to think, the first time I came here and heard something, I think it was Valkyrie with Herbert Adler conducting, would that be right? Mm-hmm. So that was probably in the mid-70s. Lotfie's tenure here, he signed on to be a co-commissioner with the Death of Klinghoffer, which was an act of great courage. And it was actually a really wonderful production performance here, which I conducted. That's the first time I'd ever conducted here in the pit. And then during Pamela's period here, she was really not only the driving force behind Dr. Atomic, but it was her idea to write an opera about the making of the atomic bomb and about Robert Oppenheimer. And the minute she suggested it to me, I knew it was a great idea for an opera. And I'd been years struggling around. We've been bouncing ideas back and forth. So I'm tremendously grateful to her. And, you know, David Gockley was the original daredevil risk taker, because it was David that commissioned Nixon in China for Houston from a composer who'd never written a note for solo voice, and a stage director who I think was just a year or two out of college. So there are lots of ties and lots of connections, and I'm so thrilled to be able to do this new opera here in my hometown.
Well, it is a great honor and a joy for us, and we are just coming off the design presentation in December, and now moving into this becoming a real reality. It's
I have to finish it first, though.
minor point. Well, as this story was unfolding again up in the Sierras, about 8,000 miles away, Richard Wagner was penning the final words, not yet music, of the Ring Cycle, this opera taking place, The Girls of the Golden West, in 1851, 1852, which was about the time that he was finalizing what was then Siegfried's Tod and preparing to write the music for Rheingold. So it's a wonderful bridge between these two seemingly different worlds, but actually two very interconnected worlds. And we'll talk a little bit after we focus on the Ring about the interplay between these two works. We've already announced the Ring and the superlative cast that we have assembled, but it is such an important piece for this company to be revisiting, to be undertaking, that we want to spend a little time talking about it today. We're thrilled that Francesca could fly out. She has an incredibly busy schedule, so that she would be able to join us today is a great blessing. And I can think of no better way to showcase a company than the Ring Cycle. It involves everybody coming together in perfect synergy, not only in the company, but also the community. And this is one of the great Wagner communities in America. The support for Wagner is tremendous, and the excitement for Wagner is tremendous. As you know, we did the Ring very successfully in 2011 in this new co-production with Washington National Opera, which Washington and we unfolded over a number of years and then played in full in Washington last year. I'm thrilled that Ring sales are going very well. We're almost 400 packages ahead of this comparable time for the last Ring. So the energy is great. The public is hungry to see this amazing piece of storytelling once again. And then a new cast in many respects, along with some returning favorites. But most importantly, our new Brunhilde, Evelyn Herlitzius, who will be making I think, triumphant debut here at San Francisco Opera. Her Brunhilde will be very different from Nina's, but I think equally as powerful in a much more raw and visceral way. And so I think it's not a question of one versus the other. We have the opportunity here to have two great, very different Brunhildes in this production. We also have Carita Mattala, who I think will match that intensity amazingly as our Sieglinde. American tenor Daniel Brenner making his debut here as Siegfried after he did it so well in Washington last year. And then Greer Grimsley, no stranger to this house, as our Wotan, a role that he has made his own, particularly up in Seattle. Brian Mulligan is our Donna and Gunther, again, someone well known to this house. And then returns of Jamie Barton as Fricka, who she just had such a great triumph at the Met in Nabucco. Falk Struckman makes his debut as Alberic, great European singer, making his debut here. And then returns from people like Ronita Miller, our Erda, David Cangellosi, our Mima, Andrea Silvestrelli, such a great part of this company's repertoire in so many different things, in this dastardly role of Hagen. And then Melissa Citro as Gutruna, whose costume is there dwarfed by one of the Giants' costumes, but a very elegant costume there for Melissa. As I mentioned, this is a co-production with Washington, and it's great that such a successful production like this can have such a life between the two coasts. And I wanted to ask Francesca to give us a little insight into the Ring and how it has kind of played out, because this this really began back in 2006 when, or before then even, but 2006 was the first Rheingold in Washington. So it's been over a decade journey now of unfolding, of discovery, of development. And Francesca, could you tell us how much was kind of baked in 2006 at that point and how much really evolved in the ensuing decade?
Well, it sounds like a long time ago, but something like The Ring makes everything feel timeless and connected. To work on The Ring over this amount of time, it doesn't seem long. I think a lot of the ideas were in more of a evolving state at that point. And last year, by doing the full cycle in Washington, I think a lot of work that we did here really crystallized there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm, of course, thrilled to bring it back here, where so much of the visuals are inspired by the search of gold. I mean, talk about two pieces that are all about the pursuit of gold in one season together is a phenomenal thing, and how that gold is the prize and the thing that destroys. We couldn't have we planned this. We really did. It's phenomenal to me that these two works, far apart in composition but close in spirit, are programmed together, and that they look at so many different aspects of our culture and our mythology. I think it's a really beautiful symbiotic connection together. So to bring it back here in a way brings back a home aspect of it for me, the same way that doing it in Washington was so much about a different kind of power. And I think that the work really has evolved each time that we've added a piece, and then of course completing the cycle here in 11, doing it in 16 in Washington, and now bringing it back here. I truly believe we made a lot of changes since we've done it, and I think it has crystallized. And what a magical cast we have.
It really is tremendous.
A truly incredible cast, and under such leadership of Donald, such a storied Wagnerian, to unfold this epic in a way that is so seamless. So I feel truly honored to have it here, and just to hear you guys talking, I thought, oh my God, we're telling the same story, because that story needs to be told constantly. These are cautionary tales that need to be spoken.
And in terms of the cast, with this new, again, many new people, new faces for The Ring, how as a director will you approach that? This is a story that has already been told. How do you go about unpacking it so that it's a somewhat blank canvas for a new cast?
Well, for me, the characters of The Ring are not gods or mortals. I think they're humans. They have the souls that we share. And I think, everyone in this group, except for our new Brunhilde, I know extremely well and have worked with over a long period of time. And Daniel did debut in Washington as Siegfried, so he's excited to bring it here. But he told me he has a mad crush on his Brunhilde here, so he's excited to be doing it with her here. So I think that's going to have some great energy to it. See what happens. But I think each of these people are such, like Peter was talking about, these are many American artists who truly are consummate performers, singing actors. This group of Europeans as well, Stefan coming back to really what I think was like a perfect Loga. It's David, who was like driving the kids in the coal mines, whether it's Brazil or the Sierra, it's the same character. So I think to tell this story again, new performers always bring a great energy. They bring more of a sense of discovery. And I think if you're not directing John Adams, to be directing Wagner is one of the greatest things possible. So new singers always teach you something that you never thought about before. It's amazing. And I think singers who tend to sing Wagnerian roles, we won't say stars or not, because we don't want to step on too many feet, but the artists who perform Wagner tend to be people who really want to talk and think and explore. And I know that all of these people are serious artists who will really want to dig into this work. And like I said, many I've known forever. I was just thinking, one of my first jobs ever was directing Karita as Lady Billows in Finnish at the Savonlinna Festival when she was a young artist and I was an assistant director there in Albert Herring. She was 19.
Wow.
She sounded like that then as well. So, it's a great cast of collaborators.
Well, and summers for us at San Francisco Opera are always frenetic affairs anyway. We do generally 3 operas right on top of each other. The Ring, of course, pushes that a little further, adding a 4th, but usually we have 3 directors and 3 conductors bringing those pieces to life. Here we have 1 director and 1 conductor in Donald Runnicles. How does that work in terms of, obviously you can't be in all places at the same time. How do you put together the logistics of overseeing an operation like this?
Well, definitely the Ring is, directing the Ring is like a huge battle plan. And I see many of the phenomenal staff here who it would not go together, without the technical department, the stage management department, Greg Henkel, Daniel Knopf, Jen Good. I see these people. It doesn't work without a team. And this company has always, since I first ever worked here, has had this amazing sense of pride and dedication and working together. So it's, yes, I'm heading it, but really everybody else is doing it. And I know that. I have a great team of associate directors and collaborators who work together, all of the music staff. It is hard to rehearse the Ring. Kip Crana, he's probably done 10 Rings. It's not like anything else. I cannot tell you what it's like. You start rehearsing at 10 in the morning and you go till 10 at night, and you do that 6 days a week, often for 2 months, every single day. And you're not just in one stage. Luckily, we have Zellerbach over there. There are 3 rehearsal halls. So you're using 3 rehearsal halls, 3 sessions a day, 6 times a week, plus multiple coaching rooms, plus a stage. I don't know if I left something out.
The Wilsey Center.
Well, now we've got this snazzy new zone. I don't know what this is going to be like. We'll see. But so just to have so many collaborators, it takes, I don't want to say it takes a village. It takes a lot of people to pull together the Ring cycle. I think the same way it takes when you do a creation, a premiere of a new work. These are the things that we all live for. We love La Boheme, don't get me wrong. Love La Boheme. I want to do La Boheme. But we all live to do these monumental pieces, whether it's The Ring or Boris or Hovanchina or War and Peace or The Trojans or premieres and creations. These are the things we just long to sink all of our beings into. And they fulfill us in ways like nothing else and speak, I think, to audiences like nothing else.
Well, and to that point, The Ring is this incredible emotional journey that takes place, at least here, over the course of a week, and we are scheduling it as we did last time, such that it can be watched in a week, in a 5-day period. And what do you hope that audiences will take away as that curtain comes down on Götterdämmerung, Cheska? What journey do you hope they take and end up with?
How do you put that in a soundbite? For me, the Ring is ultimately a positive story in the end. I do believe in regeneration and renewal. I believe that Brunhilde is the true hero that Wotan could never accept in his daughter. Yes, I do think The Ring, if you call that a feminist tale, that the girl solves the problems at the end, that's important. I also think that it's so much, as I said, a cautionary tale about greed, desire, destruction of the environment, misuse of power, all the themes that we are so aware of daily in the world right now, and having The Ring as really a mouthpiece for that, I hope allows audiences to think about bigger issues. I'm not making a statement either way on where I think that should go, but I do believe that that's where The Ring should take you. But I do believe in the optimism of rebirth and renewal by the end.
Well, let's open it up a little to talk about the intersection of these two pieces. And John and Peter, do you see at the end of Girls of the Golden West anything optimistic? I mean, it's a dark second act. As that kind of comes to its denouement, what do you think is the kind of takeaway at the end of Girls?
Well, the second act is really is a story that I knew from a little town called Downeyville, which is in the Sierras, and it involves this young Mexican woman. There were very, very few women in the gold rush, and she was working, we think, as a waitress or server in a bar, saloon, and at night in her tent, she was molested by a white miner who was obviously very drunk. And we don't know what happened, but he came back the next morning, and they got into another fight, and she stabbed him and killed him. This is a true story. And the miners in Downeyville insisted that they try her that very day, and then they hanged her, all in the same day, from a bridge over the Yuba River. So that's not exactly redemption and optimism at the end. But there is one little tiny epilogue which comes from this wonderful woman who wrote the letters, Louise Clapp, who called herself Dame Shirley. I wish I could remember it well enough to recite it to you.
Right here. Should we just get it right here? There it is.
How are you going to find it?
Or, well, you should, a paraphrase is also
I
pretty
don't
good,
know
too.
which letter it is. In any case, she's ready to leave. She's been living in this really, really raw, unpleasant, rugged little mining encampment along the river. And she's got all her belongings packed up, and she looks around and sees this incredible mess that the miners have made. You know, they've dug these holes, there are these big slag heaps, there's garbage, there are tin cans and broken bottles. And she sees a drunk guy barely able to stand up. And then she looks up and sees the trees and the never enough to be talked about beautiful blue sky of California. And that's the end of the opera. I wanted to end with that. Every time I read that phrase, I well up, because I think this woman's very much like my story. You know, she was born in New England, grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts. I was born in Massachusetts, grew up in New Hampshire, and she came out to California, and she had this psychedelic experience. So that's what really touches me, and I guess there's a redemptive quality to that moment.
I mean, just simply the fact is that's what opera is. Opera is a statement that human beings can work together. Opera is a statement that we all share more than separates us. Opera is a statement that people who see life really differently, the oboe player and the person who pulls the curtain, are joined in some larger project. And that we keep doing that in something called the Civic Theater opposite City Hall. And to say there's one way people come together, that's on that side of the street. And on this side of the street, we come together to make something unendingly beautiful. And that amount of beauty comes out of things we're not proud of. Because what it means to be human is that you're not proud of a lot of things you've done. And therefore, what you do, because you're not proud of that stuff, is you have to find a way to do something very beautiful that in some way makes up for it. And in some way, that part of yourself is the place where the growth happens and where the beauty emerges. And so we go into a dark story because that's actually where the light is. And so it's not about thumbs up, thumbs down, optimistic or cynical. It's actually just, as Francesca said, it's human, and it's the struggle to be human. And it's a struggle to be more human and to be more beautifully human, which is why the most appalling things on earth are described with the most beautiful voices in the world. There's some angelic half of that suffering that takes the suffering to a place where it actually acquires meaning, gives meaning to our lives, and deepens the whole project of being here. And many art forms are about individuals on that particular quest, searching for some kind of transformation and redemption in their lives. And the incredible project of opera, which has basically never been equaled, is it's not individuals, it's an entire community that has to move through something very difficult together. And that is the power of the form, and why it will never, 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 never go out of date.
We hope.
Hard to know where to go after that, Peter.
Make some more ones. And that's the thrill of working with John across these years, is to say, yes, there's more to do, and there are things for our generation to say in our way. And thank God Wagner said things so powerfully that, again, it's a work that is totally timeless.
Well, I was just thinking, as John, you were talking about the epilogue and the desecration of this landscape with all the litter and so forth, and the transformation into the blue sky, which is really the arc of your Götterdämmerung, Francesca. I mean, the way that opens, really with that littered landscape, speaks volumes to that same sensibility.
I'm just thinking, and it starts, Rheingold starts in the purity of the Sierras. I mean, that's the visual tableau that we use in the first scene, is that backdrop of the water, the cascading water, and the incredible beauty, the power of that nature, the overwhelming power of nature, and what humans do to try and tame it. I mean, that's such a great image, that felling of that tree. Oh my God, it's such a great image.
It is.
And, in Siegfried, it's all about like what they've done to destroy the environment by that point.
Francesca and Peter, you both have great, very storied directing careers, both in classic repertoire and also many new works. What difference does it make when you have a composer in the room with you? How does that affect your process?
I think for the better. I mean, there's, certain nights where you just say, Wolfgang, what do you think? It just doesn't, it's great to have another collaborator, because I don't know, I mean, Peter, I think you would agree, we're interpreters. They're creating. I mean, in this case, I know you wrote the libretto, so it's a creative, but ultimately we are interpreting the word and the sound and trying to understand it the same way an audience is. Whereas if you have truly a composer or a writer there, that they can help you. Mm-hmm. They're fun. It's fun. It's fun. And then you have more people at the dinner table too.
It's a miracle, and because obviously the gift of John's music is overwhelming, and probably one of the best things in my life is that first day when I hear, every once in a while I come visit and hear what John has just written, and it's just thrilling. But the other side of that now across the years is that works that, we thought we knew what they were, and we come back to them 10 years later. Coming back to El Nino a couple of weeks ago, it was overwhelming, and it does that thing that classical music does, which is it actually gets better across time. Like the pop music is at its really greatest point right then. And actually, this thing called classical music actually gets deeper across the years. And you see more in it, you hear more in it, you feel more in it. And so the thrill is also the new pieces become classical pieces. And we actually look in them very deeply as mirrors as our lives change. And we still, what looks back to us is changing with us, because that music is so deep and is so perpetually alive. And I think, again, for John's music, one of its greatest qualities is just the sheer life force that is in the heart of John's music. That heartbeat just does not stop. And it's great to feel this music across these decades.
And this is a particularly energetic score, full of such great
I
color
think energetic
and
is the
energy
word, John, right?
And John, on the flip side of that, for you as someone who has been working on this day in, day out, tirelessly for such a period now, how is it to finish a piece like this and to open up to a bigger creative dynamic of not only director and conductor, but also the cast, and are you seeding in some way the work to the broader public at that point?
The first rehearsals, they have to take all the sharp objects away from me. It's really, it's always a shock. Less so with my orchestra music, because I have a very clear idea. I played in orchestras when I was a kid. I continually conduct my own orchestra music, so I'm not quite so surprised. But I spend a year and a half or 2 years with a stupid electric piano playing the vocal lines, and I actually get used to that sound. And then I hear a human being sing a line, and it's just, it's shocking, because suddenly it's so full of, the texture and the grit and the flaws and this extreme emotionalism that the human voice has when it's singing, particularly opera singers. And Peter will tell you, my first reaction is, take it easy. And I just have to get used to it, because things sound so radically different as soon as they're sung. And then of course, it is what it is. It's Jerry Finley singing "Batter My Heart," or the wonderful singers that have done Madame Mao or Nixon or Klinghoffer, and I can't remember what it sounded like on my digital piano, but it's an interesting experience. I was saying earlier to one of the guests here that composing an opera is just, it's phenomenally labor intensive, because you can't subcontract anything. I was talking with the great architect Frank Gehry, and I said, Frank, it's right. You just get to think of the most wonderful creative things, but then you can farm out the electrical work and the plumbing, to a subcontractor. But with writing an opera, you can't do that. You have to do everything. And so it does tend to become a very solitary existence, and at times, you're so actually divorced from the reality. I remember coming to hear something, I guess it was David Scockley's big gala.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't been inside the opera house in a long time. And I was just shocked to realize, the orchestra's going to sound like that. And the voices on the stage are going to sound like that. So it is an interesting, you live in two worlds, particularly in this era, because we use computers, and I use, electronic samples to mock up my pieces, and I get used to that sound. So, when we have our first rehearsal, Peter knows that, he knows to ignore me. I'll be over in the corner, tied in knots.
Well, I could keep asking questions all afternoon, I think, but we want to make sure we allow good time for questions from you all as well. So I will turn it back to John to moderate a Q&A here.
Thank you, panel. What a wonderful discussion. So why don't we open the floor for some questions from the press? Bill Burnett, please.
I have one question, but I wanted to acknowledge before I ask the question that Friday night, Nixon in China has its 30th anniversary just after the inauguration of the Houston Grand Opera. I wanted to congratulate John on that. And secondly, that Leonard Bernstein has his 100th centennial next year, and I believe that Francesca's productions of Candide and her new production of West Side Story at Houston are going to be part of that. My question is, I'm from, I live in a gold rush county, Placer County, with a view of the American River where Rheingold may be taking place. And there's another opera that takes place in that area. And I was wondering, since you studied the gold rush, how well did Puccini and David Belasco do?
You know, David Belasco, the shock is, he was born in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually from California, although you would never guess that from one word in that damn libretto. In any case, the weird thing is by then, the Gold Rush, and in fact the West, had become the property of silent movies. And so the bizarre thing was the ways in which silent movie plots were constructed on very basic stereotypes exactly is the way David Belasco wrote the Girl of the Golden West. And what's so shocking for me is he was very famous as the Bishop of Broadway, as the most punctilious and most realistic director. Everything on stage, you know, famously he bought an entire restaurant and put it on stage so he could have a restaurant scene. You know, it's that level of like hyper-realism. Find 1 second of that for me in the Puccini. It's the most bizarre thing because everything in the Puccini is quite contrived and quite different from the experience of the West. So for me, it was very interesting looking at that piece and realizing that it was, even though that Belasco had California roots, it has very little to do with anything that ever happened in California and was really conceived more in the spirit of those Wild West novels and comics and silent movies, and where you really understand how it works and what the dramaturgy of it is and how the characters work. For me, I think we're all feeling right now in America that there are so many stories that have gone untold for too long. And so many stories of different people who have been living here forever. It's not that they're new arrivals. And in fact, it's just that a whole lot of events in our history have never been looked at with sufficient depth of the points of view of very different participants. And a whole lot of people who have been Americans for a long time have not spoken on our stages. And so one of the most powerful things is to actually go back into the history and say, well, wait a minute, the range of voices here, the range of events, the range of points of view is so rich right there at the beginning of the invention of California as a state in the United States of America, and a state like no other, and it remains a state like no other. And so the thrill is to say, yes, this was a century ago, what they saw, what they heard, and what interested them. And now, a century later, we can look at the same view and see a whole bunch of other things and be interested in a whole bunch of other things. And that, for me, is one of the marvelous examples of why many, many cultures, particularly in Africa and Indonesia and so on, when they chose a way of representing history, they chose dance, because history is just always in motion. And there's never a moment where a historical point of view just can actually freeze. And one of the very exciting things is our generation looks and sees a whole bunch of other things. And so I'm very happy to be on the shelf next to Puccini and David Belasco, but the next chapter.
Another question, please. My goodness. Yes,
Yeah,
Stephen.
for Francesca, listening to the way you were talking about the ring and as an opera experience, I found myself wondering, either here or in Washington, have you come across people whose very first contact with opera turned out to be The Ring?
Yes, actually. I have to say, in directing it, I always was thinking about the person who had never seen it. I mean, I think as a director, normally, you're always starting from the premise that even if the work was written 200 years ago, it's brand new. It was new then, so you want to create that same sensation now. And for me, I had a lot of Wagner virgins come up and tell me that this was their first outing and they totally understood The Ring, or a lot of people who'd seen The Ring many times said they found that the storytelling made it much clearer to them. So, I don't know, I always start with that intention for an audience. I think it's our job to communicate that as best we can, or from our point of view, but still it's as clear as one can possibly make it. And obviously, to me, The Ring is infinitely contemporary. I mean, it doesn't mean that it has to look contemporary, but the characters are so contemporary. Wagner understood human beings so well. And I think that's why he's connected to, all the great composers who understand humans and who can speak from the soul, really reach people who've never come. And that's, listen, most people now, people either want something 20 minutes long or they're more than willing to sit through something 19 hours long. I think that we're just in a very different time.
It's 4 minutes.
Oh, 4.
Time for another question. Stephen.
This is
Sean, sorry.
to John and Peter. Speaking of David Velasco and Girl of the Golden West, and then we get an Italian translation for that, which has had its problems on either continent. So in the shaping of the libretto for the opera, and considering the time, the century that the story is taking place, where you have people who do not speak English or English of a variety all coming together in one place is a problem in itself. But considering the masters of Puccini and Verdi who wrote for the voice, and that the vowel is what shapes the beauty of the tone, how much of an influence in creating the libretto was in consideration of, let's say, standard American English? And certainly over the past 5 decades, there has been a great plethora of great opera written to accommodate the English language. How did this influence your decisions?
Well, my models are from the great tradition of American singing. And so that has to be Stevie Wonder, or George Gershwin, or Bob Dylan, or Aretha Franklin. I just, I admire and love Benjamin Britten, but I really, I couldn't possibly write operatic style the way he does. It wouldn't be any point of being an American composer if I didn't want to make my singers sound like they're speaking their native tongue. And, that makes life both wonderful and incredibly frustrating because, the text that Peter finds often are not comfortable. They don't sound good on first encounter. Sometimes, things just flow beautifully, especially if it's a wonderful poem. Certainly in the case of Dr. Atomic, I had all these scientists talking, and Peter had done these cut and pastes of various quotes from Oppenheimer and Edward Teller, and I had to find a way to make that sound musical. That was really, really difficult. With this, I've sort of been more proactive, and if something didn't feel right, I just changed it myself and, found words that meant essentially the same thing, but that made the libretto feel and speak more fluidly. Interestingly enough, the easiest thing to set in this was actually the Mark Twain. Mark Twain, for some reason, there's just it is like listening to a great, I don't know, like George M. Cohen or something. You know, it just has that sort of brassy American lilt to it. And the largest part of the text for our opera comes from Louise Clapp, aka Dame Shirley. And she did sort of have literary pretensions herself. I mean, these letters are so good, you know that she really labored under them. And she was a very literary person herself in this tent, in this incredibly primitive conditions where she was living. She lists the books that she'd brought. She had Walton's The Complete Angler, and she had The Complete Shakespeare, and of course she had the Bible, and I think she had a volume of Keats and Shelley, and so she was very literary herself, and that was easier to set. But I think the main thing to realize is that my inspirations come from the American vernacular tradition of singing, and not from the European opera canon.
And I would just, one footnote to that, which is in a lot of John's pieces, there's also singing in Spanish. And I think that's also very much part of the texture, and texture of living in California, and also the texture of a lot of John's pieces. Am I allowed to say anything about that last aria? No, I shouldn't say anything.
Well, I learned Spanish, at a rather late age in life, but I'd lived here for so long, and I never knew what Laguna Seca was, and when Peter gave me a libretto for El Nino that was largely, consisting of poetry by Hispanic women, I thought, well, now's the time to learn Spanish. And I got really into it. And so we've somehow, I guess it's because we live in California, and there's such the powerful undercurrent of, well, it's not even an undercurrent, it's a current of Hispanic culture here that, to be able to acknowledge that and live in it and have our characters who are Hispanic actually sing in their own language has been just, become part of my operating principle.
One more question. Susan.
If I may ask just a very basic question, why is it the girls of the Golden West? Why are we choosing the girls of the Golden West?
Wow. There is already apparently an opera called The Girl of the Golden West. So that title was taken.
Rumor has it.
But actually, more than that, again, a little bit what I was talking about before. For me, what's so exciting is history is really different in our generation. And one of the things that we don't do is the great man history anymore. We're not interested in what history looked like from the point of view of one guy. What is interesting is history as it's understood across communities. And that sense that, single histories, those days are over. We don't put up statues like that anymore. It's very, very, what you always know is there was never one guy. There were lots of people doing lots of things. And those much more deeper, more embedded histories are more fun and more interesting to get, the mix and the points of view, and the fact that, again, there's not a single truth. There are multiple truths that are constantly expanding every moment. And of course, those girls, as John said, there were hardly any girls in the Gold Rush. There were hardly any women. It was a very, very small group. So that's already becomes a very interesting angle into the Gold Rush, because the Gold Rush is such an overwhelmingly male event. And having Dame Shirley as, the person who's taking you through it was already just shocking to have a female point of view about what all these men are doing. And so it turned out that that's really what we wanted to really go deeply into and create again a different kind of history than the current histories that exist. So I think it's and also, I mean, come on, for the side of a bus, that's a very good ad. You want that going by, and yes, we're selling tickets like everyone else. And some sex along with it, okay?
Well, on that note, I think we have come to the end of our time together. I want to thank our very illustrious panel to celebrate this season with the three of you is a great privilege, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be here, not only on this stage, but also this season, and sharing your artistry with us.
And can we just say, welcome, Matthew, to the San Francisco Opera. Thank you, thank you, thank you,
Thank you,
thank
Peter.
you. Yes, 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 yes.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge again David Gockley, who has been such a creative force in this season, Nicola Luisotti, who we will fete and celebrate this year, in particular for the tremendous impact he's had on this company, and to all my colleagues throughout the company whose collective energy and talents and wisdom make all this possible. So I thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking an interest in what we're doing at San Francisco Opera and sharing it with our community. And I am just thrilled for what lies ahead. So on to some very exciting things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.